Today, we're diving deep into the heart of Hindu spiritual traditions. We're going to go from a philosophy that tackles the very root of human suffering all the way to a simple, personal path of devotion. Let's get into it. We'll start, as is so often the tradition, with an invocation to Ganesha, the remover of obstacles. And that really sets the stage perfectly, because what we're talking about today is removing the ultimate obstacle, the one standing between us and our own peace and freedom. So, what is this ultimate obstacle? Well, according to these ancient texts, the root of all our suffering, our anxiety, our misery, even the whole cycle of birth and death, it all stems from one fundamental error, a massive case of mistaken identity. Let's really break down this diagnosis. The core idea is that we think we are our bodies, our minds, our feelings. We say things like, I am thin, or I am angry, or I am smart. But according to this philosophy, that simple mistake, that's the source of all our problems. And this mistake has a name, avidya. It means ignorance. But we're not talking about ignorance of, say, math or history. This is a deep, spiritual ignorance of our true nature. We're confusing the eternal, unchanging soul, the Atman, with a temporary stuff, our body and our mind. So if ignorance is the disease, then what's the cure? It's knowledge, right? And for this, the ancient sages left behind this incredible body of scripture, all designed to get rid of this ignorance and show us who we really are. Now, this is really crucial to get. These texts, like the Vedas and the Upanishads, they aren't considered just philosophical theories. They're presented as the actual, authentic records of the transcendental experiences of enlightened seers, or rishis. Think of it like a map, left behind by people who already made the journey. And right at the heart of this tradition, you've got the Brahma Sutras. You can think of this text as the master key, a framework that takes all the wisdom from the earlier scriptures and puts it into a systematic, logical philosophy. It's literally called the science of the soul. The whole idea of a sutra is so fascinating. It's like a piece of spiritual code. It's incredibly dense, just a short clue. It's not something you can just pick up and read like a book. It's almost impossible to understand without a commentary, called a bhashya, to unlock its profound meaning. And because this divine code was so compact and so dense, it just naturally led to different interpretations. This is what gave rise to all these different schools of thought, each one giving us a unique lens to understand the ultimate reality. Let's look at two of the most influential interpretations, just to see how different they can be. First, you have the great teacher Shri Shankara. He proposed that the world we see is basically an illusion, or maya, and that the only thing that's truly real is a single, impersonal consciousness called Brahman. But then you've got Shri Ramanuja, who taught that no, the world and our souls are very, very real, and they all exist as parts of a personal, loving God. Here's a great way to think about it. Sankara sees only this single vast ocean. Ramanuja sees the individual waves, which are real in their own right, but are also part of that very same ocean. So are these views just completely contradictory? Well, there's this beautiful metaphor from the tradition that helps make sense of it. It suggests that these different schools of thought are simply different rungs on the same ladder. They're different approaches for different people, but they're all leading to the exact same summit. Okay, so we have these ancient, profound texts and these complex philosophies. But how does this become a living, breathing tradition for someone today? I mean, if these teachings are a ladder, how do you actually start to climb it? The texts themselves are an amazing map, for sure. But a map isn't the journey, is it? To actually navigate the path, a guide becomes pretty essential. You need someone who has already walked the terrain and knows the way. And this is exactly the role of the guru, the spiritual master. The guru isn't just a teacher giving you information. They are a living guide who has realized these truths for themselves and can actually take a student, step by step, up that ladder of spiritual progress. The guru's job is really multifaceted. They're like a catalyst, helping to purify the disciple's mind. They provide that key that unlocks the dense meaning of the scriptures. And ultimately, they are seen as the living embodiment of the divine, assuring the sincere devotee that they can achieve final liberation, or moksha. So we've gone from this huge cosmic problem of suffering all the way down to the need for a personal guide. So what's the essence of what that guide actually teaches? Well, it often boils down to a few core, really actionable principles. To explain this, the great Saint Sai Baba used a really simple story. He said that to get the entirety of his guru's wisdom, he was asked to give only 2 small coins, or paise, in payment. But of course, these weren't ordinary coins. Those 2 coins were actually virtues. The first coin is Shraddha, an unwavering faith and confidence in your guide and in the path itself. And the second coin is Saburi, a deep patience and perseverance, that understanding that this spiritual journey takes time and steadfastness. And this path, the one that's centered on faith and patience, it's known as Bhakti, the path of loving devotion. This is where all that philosophy becomes a real lived experience. The sources are so clear about this. Just knowing what the scriptures say is pretty useless. It's like reading a recipe versus actually tasting the food. The knowledge has to be brought to life by the heart's devotion, by Bhakti. And how do you express this devotion? It's not just in prayer and ritual, it's in action. The path is actually incredibly simple. See God in all beings. This kind of practical compassion, giving water to the thirsty, food to the hungry, is presented as the highest form of worship there is. At the end of the day, the path of devotion is one of complete surrender. And the promise here is just incredible. It's that for the one who constantly remembers and hungers for the divine, God actually becomes dependent on that devotee. This relationship leads to a total merging, just like a river flowing into the sea and becoming the sea itself. So, look at the arc we've traced here. We started with a universal diagnosis of suffering caused by ignorance. We went through the coded science of the soul in the scriptures, into all the diverse philosophies it created, and finally, we funneled all the way down to the most personal and accessible practice, a simple path of faith, patience, and loving devotion. And so our journey through this philosophy comes to a close. But, maybe it's also a new beginning. We've explored the map together, so the final question just turns it all back to you. If the divine really is, as the texts say, seated right there inside your own heart, how will you begin your search? Why are we here? I mean, what's the point of it all? And how do we break free from the struggles and the suffering that seem to be part of life? These are questions every single human culture has grappled with. Today, we're going to dive into the ancient Hindu framework for answering these ultimate questions, a really profound quest for what's known as liberation. Now, to start any big undertaking, it's traditional to seek blessings. So just as you see here, we begin by saluting Lord Ganesha, the remover of obstacles. And with that, our journey starts with a really direct question. What is the real, fundamental root cause of all our troubles? It's a question sages have been thinking about for literally thousands of years. And here's the answer they came up with. It turns out the core problem is basically a case of mistaken identity. We wrongly believe that we are this body, when our true self is what the quote calls the pure Atman, the eternal self. This fundamental ignorance, which has a name in Sanskrit, avidya, is the one foundational error that kicks off all our suffering. So the big question is, how on earth do we fix an error that profound? Well, for millennia, the answer has been sought in this incredible body of sacred texts called the Vedas. You can think of them as the original blueprint for understanding reality, and more importantly, for overcoming this deep-seated ignorance. Think of the Vedas as a complete guide to life, almost like a human body. The Karmakanda is like the feet. It deals with all the rituals and actions you perform in the world. The Upasanakanda is the heart, all about worship and devotion. But for our journey, we're going to focus on the Jnanakanda. That's the head. It's the part that deals directly with the highest knowledge of reality itself. Okay, so this knowledge, it is vast. It's incredibly profound. So a great sage named Vyasa took on this monumental task of organizing and systematizing the entire philosophy of the Jnanakanda into one single, super powerful text, which became known as the Brahma Sutras. And the result was the Brahma Sutras. You can honestly think of it as a science of the soul. Each sutra is like a tiny, dense piece of code, packing an immense amount of philosophical meaning into just a handful of words. This is not casual reading, folks. It's a blueprint for spiritual engineering.
But here's the thing about that kind of compression. Because these sutras are so incredibly condensed, they're almost impossible to understand without a commentary, or what's called a bhasha. And this need for interpretation is actually what gave rise to this rich, amazing diversity of thought. Some of the most brilliant minds in history analyzed these sutras, and that led to very distinct and equally profound schools of philosophy.
So let's just look at two of the most influential interpretations, which, as you'll see, lead to very different spiritual paths. On one side, you have Shankara's pure monism, or Advaita. In this view, the ultimate reality, Brahman, is this impersonal absolute. The world we see, it's an illusion, or Maya, and your soul, it's already identical to Brahman. So for Shankara, liberation isn't about becoming one with God, it's about realizing you already are. But then, on the other hand, you have Ramanuja's qualified monism. He presents a personal God, full of divine qualities. In his view, the world and our individual souls are very real parts of God's body. So the goal here is a loving relationship with this personal God, where your soul stays unique, even in liberation. Two very different flavors, right?
So you've got these incredibly deep intellectual paths. But let's be real, for most people throughout history, this level of high-flying philosophical debate isn't exactly the most direct route. So how does this wisdom actually get to the people? The answer, for millions and millions of people, is that it's found not just in abstract texts, but in living teachers and stories you can actually relate to. And this is where the path becomes deeply personal and, honestly, accessible to everyone. Right at the heart of this path is the guru, the spiritual guide. The guru isn't just a teacher of concepts, they are seen as a living, breathing bridge to the divine, someone who has already walked the path and can now guide others through it. And that's exactly why texts like the GuruCharitra are so important. Instead of giving you dense sutras, they use these amazing illustrative stories and parables to get the deepest truths across. They make the whole spiritual journey come alive through narrative. These stories are just brilliant at showing, not just telling. You learn about supreme devotion through the story of Anasuya. You grasp the sheer power of faith from the tale of a boy whose simple worship literally manifested a real temple. And these big ideas like karma and rebirth, you understand them through the story of a king who finds out he was a dog in a past life, elevated by just a single good deed. These stories make these huge virtues totally tangible. So, this brings us to what is maybe the most widely practiced path of all, Bhakti Yoga. This is the path of pure devotion and total surrender, and it's exemplified so powerfully in the teachings of saints like Sai Baba of Shirdi. Sai Baba taught that to get across this ocean of worldly existence, a devotee just needs to offer two little coins. The first coin is Shraddha, which means unwavering faith, total belief. The second is Saburi, which is patience and perseverance. So you need faith that the path is true and the patience to actually walk it, step by step. And this idea of faith, it's all about complete surrender. It's the physical and mental act of placing your trust entirely in the guru, which is symbolized perfectly by bowing at their feet. It's like a declaration that you're finally letting go of your own ego and trusting that a higher wisdom is going to guide you. And check this out. This kind of surrender completely transforms your daily life. Every single action, even something as simple as eating your lunch, becomes an offering. It's a state of constant remembrance, where you're living in this amazing reciprocal relationship with the divine. The guru is there for the devotee, and in a way, becomes dependent on their love. It's beautiful. So we've explored dense philosophy, we've looked at inspiring stories, and we've talked about heartfelt devotion. Now, these might seem like totally different approaches, right? But what's so cool is that they all converge on one single ultimate goal. It doesn't matter which path you take, the destination is the same for everyone. Moksha. This is the ultimate freedom. It's freedom from the ignorance that makes us mistake the temporary for the real, and it's an end to that painful cycle of birth and death. And the real beauty of this whole framework is that it offers different paths for different kinds of people. For the intellectual, the thinker, there's jnana yoga, the path of knowledge. For the person of action, the doer, there's karma yoga, the path of selfless duty. And for the emotional, heart-centered person, there's bhakti yoga, the path of devotion we just explored. Now, we've focused mostly on knowledge and devotion today, but all three are seen as totally valid roads leading to the very same mountain peak. So, this ancient quest, even though it's rooted in all this deep philosophy and scripture, at the end of the day, it becomes a deeply personal journey. It asks each of us to look at our own nature and just consider how we might walk toward a life with more meaning and more freedom. So, the final question really isn't what the texts say, but what resonates inside of you: intellect, action, or devotion?